one thing I've got is The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah, and I believe it's set in France, is it? It's World War II. Yes, it is. I don't know why I'm doing that because I've got my bifocals on. If you're new to the channel, I'm Jack, and this is a reading ramble where I just chat all about what's been going on in my life in terms of reading and books and thoughts I've been having. And if you're not new, welcome back to Spread Book Joy. So the last reading ramble I did, I talked about being in a reading frenzy, and I was in a reading frenzy. I read an awful lot in the month of April, more so than I did in previous months, but there were a number of reasons for that. One was I joined in loads and loads of things, but normally I would fall flat on my face joining in loads and loads of things because I just generally don't have the time at the moment to do lots of reading. But I had the Easter holidays from school, so the amount that I read in April was just quite a bit more than what I've read in previous months. I finished 11 books in April. I actually finished a book, today's the 1st of May that I'm filming this, and I actually finished a book today as well, so I only had a few pages to go on that. So I read nearly 12 books in April, but 11. And the previous months I've only read 6, or it's not about the amount though, because I've talked about this in previous rambles. This year is not about, I didn't set myself like a numerical target for reading, and I'm trying not to focus on the numbers, which is why it's only just now that I'm just counting up what I read in April. And I'm trying not to do I read this many books in this month, but I am keeping records of it just because I like to keep records of what I read. But I have been on a bit of a reading frenzy. So I last spoke to you a few weeks back, and I was in the middle of all this sort of buddy reading and challenges, and I had a lot of books. I had about 8 books on the go at once at one point, and I was enjoying it. And I didn't feel like this is too much. If it ever gets to be too much now, I'm just going to no, I'm not joining in with that, or I'm not doing that, because I'm not putting pressure. Invariably, the pressure to read will be from yourself. If you're ever joining in loads of readathons or group reads and things like that, people just are happy if you're joining in, and if you can't, they understand. So the only pressure ever comes from yourself, right? But I had an amazing month because I finished off lots of things. So I can just run through what I finished. I finished Quartet in Autumn, I've talked about that recently, and A Man Called Uva. They were the first books I finished. And then I've talked about my obsession with the Charlaine Harris Sookie Stackhouse series, which is a series that I love, and I am rereading now with the Out-of-the-coffin Readalong, which is run by Amy and Ange. So Amy from BookTube with Angie. BookTube with Angie? Amy from BookTube with Amy and Ange from Ange's Book Chatter. They're running the Out-of-the-coffin Readalong, which is one Sookie book per month. And I resisted it in the first few months of the year, and then Dead to the World, which is book 4, was their read-along for April, and I love that book. So I read it, and then now I've just gone mental for Sookie Stackhouse books. I read Unsettled Ground, I finished that. Eye of the World, I finished that. Pandora's Jar, which is a non-fiction Natalie Haynes book on women in Greek myth, very good. Pachinko. So I think I'm getting into the books now that I was either in the middle of reading or starting on my last reading ramble. Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. That book has been on my TBR for so long, and Gemma over at Gemma Books is running a Pachinko-along, and it's been amazing, an amazing month of reading, amazing group read. I ended up whizzing through it and finishing it early, but I'm glad I did, because as it turns out, the last few weeks I've just had no time for reading. I've barely read anything. But yeah, Pachinko, what a story, intergenerational story of a Korean family from the sort of 1920s or 1930s right through to the 1980s. And I've learned an awful lot about the Korean diaspora and the Koreans living in Japan, and the Japanese occupation of Japan, and Japan during the Second World War. It was an amazing book, real eye-opener for me in terms of, history of that, of that section of history. I had no idea about that Japanese invasion of Korea and the treatment of Koreans in Japan, who were never allowed to become citizens at that time. They weren't allowed to become citizens, and then the sort of discrimination against Koreans in Japan continued right through to the latter parts of the book in the 80s. yeah, it was fascinating and real hard-hitting book. Yeah, so without giving away spoilers, we sort of follow the lives and fortunes of one family, and I do love that kind of story. I love a really cross-generational saga, and that was brilliant, and everyone in the group has really, really enjoyed it, and talking to everyone in the group has just elevated the read for me, as it always does when you read with people who are thoughtful and make great contributions to the discussion. So yeah, that was fantastic. I finished House of Leaves, Mark Z. Danielewski's House of Leaves. My goodness, House of Leaves, what to say about it? Yeah, so this is the first time I've had a chance to talk about it, really. I buddy read it with Alice over at Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, and I think she's put a review of it up. She has talked about it on her channel anyway, so I'll link what she's had to say about it in the description box if I can find what particular video it is. But House of Leaves is a really strangely structured book. There is a name for that kind of structure apparently, so I did have a look it up, but it's told through different narrators in the story. There's a documentary film, and there are research papers and an essay around whether this documentary film was real, because it concerns a family who've moved into a house and some strange things start to happen with the house. And the person telling this, there's a narrator telling the story in between that. He's found this research and he's put it together, and he's, anyway, it's a really strangely structured story, very interestingly structured. In fact, one of the cleverest structures ever, but it's full of footnotes and it's laid out in a really kind of challenging way, almost like a puzzle, in a sense that you have to puzzle your way through. And there were elements of it that I really, really enjoyed, where the way you were being made to read the story was kind of mirroring the journey of the people in the house in the documentary. And I can't really say much more without giving spoilers, but yeah, I really was into the story right up until a certain few sections, and then because it's written as a really kind of like a fake academic treatise basically on this house and this documentary, so it's full of footnotes and references to papers and articles, and after a while that just got really old, and yeah, I'm very story driven, so anything that interrupted the flow of the story or took me out of the story for seemingly no purpose. I mean, people are going to be yelling at me, there were purposes to it and whatever, but I for me, it kind of just it was like it was trying to be too clever at certain points. And at the end of it, I did say overall I enjoyed House of Leaves overall, but it was hard, and if I hadn't been buddy reading it with Alice, I wouldn't have got through. So thank you, Alice, for buddy reading that with me. I'm glad I've read it. I am really glad I've read it. It was an experience, but not always enjoyable. And one point, if I can find the sound, I was messaging Alex. I was messaging Alice one day about the story and a creepy bit in the story, and I was on my own in the house, and a crack of thunder happened because there was a storm outside and it scared the life out of me. So I was messaging her and telling her about it, and then it happened again while I was messaging her. Anyway, it was all very funny. Good experience. The other thing I finished with, I went straight on from the book this month for the Out-of-the-coffin Readalong, which is Dead to the World, to book 5 of the Sookie Stackhouse books, because I just wanted to go straight into the next book, which is really not in the spirit of doing a group read, a readathon, but I did, and I finished Dead as a Doornail. So then I was like, I can't go into book 6. I really need to slow down, because I want to take part in the discussions, and I want to have it fresh in my mind, each book they're talking about, while we talk about it. So I've tried to stop myself from reading the next one. So what I thought I'd do is go back and read the 3 books that I hadn't read from the start of the series. So I'm doing that. So then I read Dead Until Dark, which is the first Sookie Stackhouse book, and I finished that. And then I finished finally The False Rose by Jakob Wegelius, which is a library book, and I am taking it back. I've had it renewed a few times, but I finished this yesterday or the day before. I think it was the day before. I love the character of Sally Jones. This is the follow-up to The Murderer's Ape, which is one of my favourite middle grade books of all time. And this was good, but I don't think I was as invested in the story or what was going on. And in this story, Sally Jones is the ape protagonist. She's a gorilla protagonist, and she tells these stories. The first one was a mystery where her friend, the chief that she sails around on boats with because they own a boat together, he got accused of murder and she had to solve the case to get him freed. And there was emotional investment in that because Sally was in danger because of everything that happened, and you were worried about Sally, you were rooting for her to free the chief, and all of that was really good. So in this story, they find some jewellery hidden on their boat, and they go to find out who it belongs to and what the mystery is around it. And I didn't really care about that, to be honest with you. There was no point where I was emotionally invested, and it took about 100 pages or so, 80 pages or so, before we found out that was going to be what the mystery was about. And I just wasn't that invested in it. I still enjoyed the writing style, I still enjoyed the characters, and I think he writes a wonderful yarn, like a ripping kind of yarn. But it didn't quite do it for me. This one was set in Glasgow, which was really interesting. So they go travelling to find out the owner of this particular thing, and it leads them to Glasgow, and they get involved in the underworld there. It's set in the 1950s there. Towards the end, I was interested in what happened. I wanted to read it to the end to find out, but it's a chunker. I mean, it's like 450 page children's middle grade book, and granted, like the typeface is big and there's not that much typing, the pages are a lot bigger than than the typing that's on it, so like the type's that big. But yeah, disappointed that it wasn't as good. And I think if it had been the first time I've read one of his books, I probably would have DNF'd it. So I really hope the series picks back up again, because I didn't think this was as good, to put it that way. All right, so in terms of reading plans for May, there are lots of things going on BookTube. There is May of the Moderns, which is an amazing readathon being run by the lovely Margaret Pinard, and I'll link to that in the description box. And there are some challenges, there are group reads, you can sign up for a buddy read. It's probably too late to do that now, but she's got all sorts of things going on for May of the Moderns, which is to read books which were published before 1949, I believe. I'll put on the screen if I've got that correct, but I'm going to read Howard's End by EM Forster because I've been meaning to read that for some time. So that's going to be my plan for May. I'm going to read Howard's End. And the other thing that's going on that I'm taking part in is there are a few things. The Tudor-along, which starts this month, to read the Alison Weir's Six Queens books. So she's got historical fiction books based on the Six Wives of Henry VIII. The first book is Katherine of Aragon, and that's starting this month, and that's being run by Gemma at Gemma Books and Emily at Novell Novels, and they're doing a book every 2 months. So that's totally doable, because I don't think I can start it this month, which I'll talk about in a minute. But they're doing Katherine of Aragon. I'll link their videos in the description box. So if you want to take part in those, you can go and do that. So they're going to read a book every 2 months. And that also ties in with Katie over at Books and Things is running the historical fiction read-along. So she's got some really interesting challenges, actually. The first one is read a work of historical fiction set in the country you're from. And Katherine of Aragon covers that for me because it's set in England. I'm from England. Well, I'm not from England, because originally I'm Irish, but I was born in England, so there you go. Read a work of historical fiction set in a different country to the one you're from. I finally got a copy of The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah, which is set in France, Second World War, and everyone's read this. I haven't. My sister-in-law lent me this, so I'm going to try and read that. And then read a work of fiction with a speculative element. So basically a work of fiction where the historical narrative is different, or it's like a different... like an alternate history is what I think she said. Where are we? Yeah, so an alternate kind of history, or with maybe some sort of magical element to it. I don't know. Anyway, so I've got this, which is a middle grade book that I talked about recently. I was talked about in a book haul. I was sent it by the lovely Jen over at Narwhal Books on Instagram, and she sent me this, and it's a middle grade, and it's set in an alternative version of 1800s America, where oddities are things that Magical Oddities, Ordinary Objects with Extraordinary Powers. So a girl called Clover Elkin lives in a land of marvels at the edge of the unified states of America. So it's set in an alternate history of America where magic's kind of real. So that sounds really cool. So I'm going to be reading that. Well, I say I'm going to be reading it. There are a few other things that are going on BookTube first, and I'll talk about my plans after I finish talking about those. But the other things that are going on, there's May of the Moderns, Middle Grade May, so this kind of ties in with Middle Grade May as well, because it's middle grade, is being run by Storm Reads, and it used to be, Middle Grade May is something that happened, I believe, before middle grade March, and she's reinstituting it, is what she's mentioned in her announcement video. So we've got lots of challenges for that, and she's got an amazing array of suggestions and recommendations in her video. So I'll link that in the description box too. In terms of what I'm doing, you might notice over the next few weeks, I'm trying to batch record some videos today. I've got a huge work project coming up. So I'm going to be quite absent for social media, and my work project involves a lot of reading and a lot of study. So May is going to be a really busy work month for me. So I don't want to disappear entirely from BookTube, but you might notice that I'm watching less. If you're a booktuber, but might be watching less of the videos. I'm going to try and keep up with content though, because I just find it so difficult. I get so far behind so quickly when I don't watch videos weekly. But my own content is going to be reduced somewhat. I've put out a video, very sort of brief end of Picture This, because in April I ran my own readathon with Shelley Swearingen Picture This. So I don't really want to talk about that in this video because I'm putting out a separate video for that. But April was a really great reading month for me and a great BookTube month for me. May looks set to be something super busy personally, so I'm going to be focusing on that because it's an important project and it needs to be done, and it takes me right through to the last week of May. So I just got to focus on that really, and hopefully I'll get some reading of these sorts of things in between. I've just decided, because I was going to do the Anne along, I'm behind on. That's the one thing that I'm really upset I didn't finish, the Anne of Windy Poplars, which was the book for last month. I'm going to try and catch up on that, but if I don't, I don't, and I know that the summer's coming up and I'll have much more time to read, and I will catch up on things I wanted to read then. So are there any other events taking place in May that I haven't mentioned? If there are, drop them in the comments below. If you're running anything, if you want to make people aware of anything, just pop it in the comments below. And I hope it goes well for you if you are running anything, because I really loved running a readathon this month, and I've got loads of people's videos to catch up on to watch for Picture This as well. Anyway, I hope you are all well and you enjoy the month of May, and I will see you again soon. Bye.